1939. Europe is on the brink of a Second World War. For the past year, Germany had rearmed the military and began expanding. In 1938, they Anschlussed Austria, and in the same year, they annexed the Sudeten region of Czechoslovakia. The Allies, Britain and France, appeased Hitler's territorial expansion, hoping that doing so would prevent war. But when Germany invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia in 1939, the Allies knew that Poland would likely be next, and so they warned Hitler that if he invaded Poland, it would mean war between him and the Allies. Poland was in a very precarious situation. They had emerged as a nation after World War I, and they were surrounded by enemies. On their east was the Soviet Union, who were bitter after their loss to Poland in the Polish-Soviet War, and on their west was Germany, who wanted the Polish corridor that separated Germany from East Prussia. The Polish High Command under Marshal Rydz-Śmigły formed a defensive plan for an invasion. Śmigły had managed to obtain a non-aggression pact from the Soviets, meaning they could focus on their western border with Germany. The Polish High Command formed Plan West, a defensive plan in which the Polish army would fight defensive retreats on the border and then hold the line at the Vistula River just long enough for their allies Britain and France to invade Germany, forcing the Germans to divert forces, and between the two of them they would defeat Germany and save Poland. Plan West, however, had many flaws, and many were unsure if the Polish army could withstand a German invasion, as Poland's army was equipped with old weapons and they still heavily utilized horses, and very few within the Polish army had vehicles. And when it came to armored warfare, Poland's newest tank, the 7TP, could actually destroy all German tanks up to the Panzer IV. But unfortunately, the 7TP was a rare sight, as not many were made, and a more common sight was the TKS Tankette, which was no match for any of the German panzers. And in the air, the Polish Air Force had to rely on mostly obsolete P-11 biplanes, as most of their planes had been sold off to various other countries. On top of this, Marshal Śmigły's efforts to mobilize had been stopped by the West, as they said doing so would provoke a war, leaving the Polish army with insufficient men, and even when general mobilization was ordered, it came one day before war broke out, leaving Poland only 39 divisions to face the 66 German divisions that had massed on their border. On September 1st, 1939, the German invasion began, and German armored spearheads punched through the Polish lines. Army Group North attacked the Polish corridor, and Army Group South attacked Lodz, Krakow, and Warsaw. The Polish army was being pushed back, and by September 2nd, Plan West was falling apart, as the Germans continued to advance without pause. Finally, on September 3rd, Britain and France declared war on Germany, and promised to come to Poland's aid within a few days. In the meantime, Poland continued to lose ground, and on September 5th, armies Krakow, Lodz, Prusy, and Poznan withdrew beyond the Vistula River, abandoning western Poland. But unfortunately, due to drought, the Vistula had almost completely dried up, and it posed little obstacle for the Germans. The Polish desperately appealed to their allies for help, and on the 7th, the French responded by launching the Saar offensive into Germany. The French outnumbered the Germans by nearly 5-1, and reports indicated the French were quickly advancing. In the meantime, the German advance continued, and on the next day, September 8th, the 1st Panzers were spotted on the outskirts of Warsaw. And on 5 p.m., the Germans would assault the city with the 4th Panzer Army on the western side, but they were repulsed with heavy casualties. The Germans reinforced and attacked the next day, but all attacks were repulsed by the Polish defenders. After repeated attacks and bombings, the Germans finally broke through the defense at Warsaw on the 12th, and the German Third Army began moving southward to cut off Warsaw from the east, and on September 15th, the Germans had completely encircled Warsaw. More bad news was to come, as the next day, the 16th, the French, despite their massive advantage and crushing momentum, halted their advance, and French General Gemelli ordered them to withdraw back to the Maginot Line. This news was devastating, as without the support of their allies, Plan West was doomed. As if it couldn't get any worse, on September 17th, The day after the French retreated from Germany, reports came in from the east. Soviet soldiers were pouring over the border, and German troops were retreating before them. The Poles began to celebrate, believing the Red Army was there to save them, and some cities even threw open their gates to the Red Army. But the horrible truth would soon be revealed, as the Soviets weren't there to save Poland. They were there to take their slice of Poland in accordance to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact signed between the Germans and Soviets earlier that year. This pact was an agreement that the two would split Poland between them. With Poland abandoned by its allies and now being invaded on two sides, their fate was sealed, and the Polish government fled the country. Without leadership, the Polish army didn't know how to respond to the Soviet invasion, and they would attempt to retreat to the Polish-Romanian border. But at this point, most Polish armies were crippled or encircled, and on September the 28th, despite heavy fighting from the Polish defenders, Warsaw fell after a brutal siege that destroyed 40% of the city. What little remained of the Polish army fled into Romania, and on October 6th, after only 35 days, all Polish resistance was crushed, and the country was divided between Germany and the Soviet Union. In the defense of Poland, the Poles suffered over 800,000 casualties, and the Germans and Soviets just under 100,000. Poland would suffer for years under a brutal occupation where the Nazis would exterminate millions of Polish Jews, and Polish civilians would suffer under brutal Nazi repercussions as they would attempt to eradicate the Polish culture. Poland was left in ruins, with many cities, including Warsaw, having all their buildings destroyed. Even the end of the Second World War would bring no relief to Poland.